Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari. Jai Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandanam Braja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Kunja Bihari. Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari. Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Anjaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Mr. Pad Paramahansa Parujikacharya Ashtotar the Sri Srimad Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayo Vishnupad Paramahansa Parujikacharya Ashtotar the Sri Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavindi Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhaktabinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Narayam Namaskritya Narayam Shaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiriye Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, we should offer our respectful obeisances unto Lord Narayan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, unto Narayan Rishi, the supremest human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author, and unto Srila Prabhupada, the translator, commentator, and our spiritual master. Nashtaprayesha Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatyuttama Shloke Bhakti Bhavati Naishtiki. By regular attendance and classes on Srimad Bhagavatam and by rendering devotional service to the pure devotee, all that is inauspicious within the heart is destroyed almost to nil. And loving devotion to the Supreme Lord, who is glorified in transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 19th day of December 2021 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace HG Dravida Swami Prabhupada. And we're in Canto 5, entitled The Creative Impetus. Chapter 10, the discussion between Jadabharat and Maharaj Rahugana. Text number 13. Unmatta Matta Jadavat Swasangstham Gatasya Me Vira Chikitsitena Artaha Kiyan Bhavata Shikshitena Stabdha Pramattasya Chapishtapeshaha Unmatta matta jadavat swasangstam Gatasya me vida chikitsitena Artakyan bhavata shikshitena Stabda pramattasya chapishtapeshaha Unmatta matta jadavat swasangstam Gatasya me vida chikitsitena Artaskyan bhavata shikshitena Stabda pramattasya chapishtapeshaha Unmatta matta jadavat swasangstam Gatasya me vida chikitsitena Artakyan bhavata shikshitena Stabda pramattasya chapishtapeshaha Unmatta matta jadavat sasangsam Gatasya me vida chikitsitena Arthakyan bhavata shikshitena Stabdha pramattasya chapishtapeshaha Unmatta matta jadavat swasangstam Tasya me vida chikitsitena Artakyan bhavata shikshitena Stabdha pramattasya chapishtapeshaha Unmatta matta jadavat swasangstam Gatasya me vida chikitsitena Artakyan bhavata shikshitena Stabdha pramattasya chapishtapeshaha Unmatta matta jadavat swasangstam Gatasya me veda chikitsitena. Artakyan bhavata shikshitena. Stabdha pramattasya tapishtapesha. Unmattamatta jadavatva sangstam. Gatasya me veda chikitsitena. Artakyan bhavata shikshitena. Zoom land, anyone? Okay. Unmatta, madness. Matta, a drunkard. Jadabat, like a dunce. Swasangstam, situation in my original constitutional position. Gatasya, of one who has obtained. Me, of me. Vira, O king. Chikitsitena, by your chastisement. Artaha, the meaning or purpose. Kiyan, what? Bhavata, by you. Shikshitena, by being instructed. Stabdha, dull. Pramattasya, of a crazy man. Cha, also. Pishtapeshaha, like grinding flour. Translation. So Jadabhat is speaking to King Rahugana. My dear king, you have said, you rascal, you dull, crazy fellow, I am going to chastise you, and then you will come to your senses. In this regard, let me say that although I live like a dull, deaf, and dumb man, I am actually a self-realized person. What will you gain by punishing me? If your calculation is true and I am a madman, then your punishment will be like beating a dead horse. There will be no effect. When a madman is punished, he is not cured of his madness. Purport. Everyone in this material world is working like a madman under certain impressions falsely acquired in the material condition. For example, a thief who knows that stealing is not good, and who knows that it is followed with punishment by a king or by God, who has seen that thieves are arrested and punished by the police, nonetheless steals again and again. He is obsessed with the idea that by stealing he will be happy. This is a sign of madness. Despite repeated punishment, the thief cannot give up his stealing habit. Therefore, the punishment is useless. Om jnana timirandasya jnanandana shalakaya chakshu unmidatam mena tasmai shri gurave namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So the theme in this verse is madness. And the futility of punishing a madman. A madman needs to be first restrained and then put under control. Hare Krishna. If you have a society where the majority of people are supposedly sane and you have someone who is understood to be mad, then there's a place for them because they create havoc in society. Many of you don't know this, but back in the 80s, when Ronald Reagan was president, he closed all the madhouses. You remember that? We call them what did we call them at the time? Psychiatric hospitals or something. He closed them down, and the idea was that there would be local places where people would be taken care of, which didn't really manifest very uniformly or very effectively. And so therefore many of these people are on the street, as you may have noticed. That was the beginning of, anyway, and that it wasn't a very good idea. So, but Srila Prabhupada famously I think one of his early disciples was saying how his mother was saying that, oh, you've joined a cult in which people think everyone is crazy. They're in the cult, and now you're going to become crazy too. So Prabhupada picked up on it and said, and he wrote an essay of Who is Crazy, famous. I think it was published separately. Who is crazy? Which is a very important question, because as clearly there's a lot of confusion and distress, and it's the age of Kali, so there's a lot of fighting, and it's just going on, and periodically it flares up into huge wars. So how is this coming about? For instance, you have many of you, probably all of you, know about World War II, where you had Germany, and you had someone who would arguably said to be crazy, but he was very smart at the same time. He can be very intelligent and also be a madman. And he had convinced this whole population in Germany that the Jews are out to get them, and then that they were the cause of all their problems. They stabbed them in the back, and that's why they lost World War I. And he had convinced them of all this, and they started a war. They started the whole thing, and came close to succeeding, actually. And so most people think, well, that was all born of that incredible delusion, blaming these, people for all the problems that we had and firing them up. But since then, there have been similar instances, and some would argue that we're going through that right now. And what I'm saying is that when you get a large percentage of the people in a society who believe something that is clearly not true, then it can cause total havoc in that society and even in the world, if it's in a country that has nuclear weapons. So this idea of madness is central to our philosophy. And as you may remember, this word matta, nunam pramatta kurute vikarma yadindriya piteya panoti. This is a famous verse. Go way back to Rishabhadev's teachings, 4th or 5th verse. He speaks this verse, and there's a series of 3. But there he says, the same word here is pramatta. Matta or pramatta means mad, or in this case, what did he say? A dunce, someone who's unintelligent. So he says, it is certainly true that those who are simply focused on sense gratification, indriya priti, he uses that very word, which means sense gratification, kurute vikarma, and we're ready to perform all kinds of activities, sinful activities, vikarma, in order to enjoy sense gratification. Such people are mad. Kurute vikarma yadindriya priti apanogri nasaru manye. He's saying, my opinion is it's not a very good idea. It's not a good position to be in. Because by acting in that way, you're sure to deepen and increase and perpetuate your suffering. Sure to get another body, and because you're performing vikarma or sinful activity, you're going to suffer like anything. It may not be a human body, maybe a human body, but it's just craziness. So where do you find in this world people who are basically engaged in that way? Everybody's engaged either to try to enjoy gross material suffering or enjoyment or subtle sense gratification. But everyone is performing all kinds of sinful activities, and therefore there's so much suffering going on. So in this verse, Jadabharata, he declares that although I seem to be mad, actually, and he says, I'm self-realized, swasang stam, I'm situated in my original constitutional position. In other words, he was acting mad, as we know, so that he would be left alone. He did that so he could become separate from other people in his family who weren't devotees. He didn't want to be surrounded or imposed upon by non-devotees in their kata and their association. He was so determined that in this life, he's not going to get deviated like he did in 2 lives previously. So now in this, what's happened is that he was saved from the beheading by the dacoits who were worshipping Kali. That happened. And now he's been drafted, if you will, into carrying this palanquin, which is how you pronounce it, by the way. But because of his self-realization, he's not willing to even harm an ant. And that's not a very good way to try to carry a heavy palanquin. You have to be, forget about what you're stepping on, right? So he didn't do that, and it was very unsteady. So this king, Mahugana, he was under the false illusion. He was mad and identifying himself as a king, and that therefore he had authority over him. And first he was very sarcastic in enforcing his rule. But that didn't help. And so then he started berating Jadabhat. And he very logically said, well, what's the point? If I'm really as crazy as I seem to be, it's not going to help if you chastise me because I won't change. And what he probably uses the analogy of the beating a dead horse. What the word is pishtapesha. Grinding flour. Does that sound like a good idea? Grinding flour. It's already ground. It's just wasting time, right? Doesn't have any meaning. And so if you're correct that I'm really as mad and as dunce as you think, it's not going to help because I'm not going to reform. But the fact is that I'm sasangstam. I'm actually self-realized. So at that time, it's still not going to help because I'm not going to change just because of your chastisement. So the point is, he's saying you're performing a futile activity. But back to this Matta Jadavat, because the world, as Prabhupada has often said, everybody is mad. You can see, well, what's one of the main things that characteristics of a mad person? It's almost like a cliche. Someone thinks they're Napoleon, right? I mean, it used to be you'll find people, and there's a whole bunch of Jesus Christ also in these hospitals or whatever they're keeping them now, when they get them. In other words, when you think you're something you're not, and when you think other people are out to get you, and the CIA has a chip in my brain or whatever, In other words, you're operating on an assumption and a belief, and it's deeply held, that is wrong. And therefore, all your activities and all your words and everything, your whole life is based on a fallacy. And so, how can you attain a peaceful, happy condition in that way? You think everyone else is mad because they don't realize that you're King George. Don't you understand? I mean, you can imagine. I remember I used to have, for months, there was a lady parking in my, you may know where I live, there's 4 parking spaces there. And she had rented one of the apartments. And right next to my little spot was her spot, and she had parked a huge camper there. It was like a big thing, and she was just sitting there for months. And it created a little cul-de-sac where the homeless like to kind of sneak in, which is right next to my car. Anyway, so one day I come out and I said, "Excuse me, can you please, I need to get in my car, And one of the guys said, "Oh, when is it going to be a Rath Yatra?" And it turned out that he had been in LA for some time. He'd been, seen the Rath Yatra, he liked the Rath Yatra, he saw that I was, He said, "Oh, this was way before COVID." Said, "Oh, it's coming up around April, during the Earth Day." But that same guy, a few weeks later, because it's so difficult on the street, and he looked very distressed and everything. He says, "There's a lot of crazy people on the street. There's a lot of crazy people around here, And I think he was thinking about himself slipping away, but and so it's a very kind of unfortunate situation to be in, not to have any shelter where you can get away from the outside world and just be unsteady in your whole existence. But when we understand the world through Krishna consciousness and through Bhagavad Gita, we can see, Prabhupada's conclusion is that everybody is thinking they're something they're not. They're thinking they are this body and mind. Prabhupada makes the point I just heard, there's 2 bodies. We have the gross and the subtle body. So everyone identifies, materialists identify more or less with the physical body, but even more importantly with the mind. That's that may change, but both of those together, like the shirt and the coat. I have actually two shirts because it's so cold. I have an undershirt on, so that's your subtle body, and the coat is your gross body. So we're all wearing this coat eventually, and when someone dies, the coat sits there. The gross body is lying there. But the subtle body, which you never saw, is not dead, and that's gone on to another destination, taking you to another body somewhere according to your karma. So isn't it madness to identify completely with this gross body, with the color? I mean, how many wars have been fought? The color of the body. That is such a huge factor in today's politics in America. It's just insane. And that is a sign of madness. So what is our mission? Our mission is to try to cure people of the madness, to give them the sanity, the real information of who they are, and give them a method by which they can start acting on the true identity, so that the illusion and the madness is mitigated step by step, and they can finally be peaceful in their normal condition. And that's really what we're doing. And the books of Srila Prabhupada, the chanting, the whole institution is like a big psychiatric hospital in one sense. But it's proactive. We don't just sit in our safe temples and try to defend ourselves against the illusion. Of course we are. But the reason why there's any of us is because Prabhupada didn't do that. He went out and tried to engage and find within the mad persons someone who's a little less mad or is a little open to the cure, which begins with the chanting of the holy name, the major cure. And then a whole process, this is that has been created and thought out. I was just reading those Goswami prayers, and many of you may not remember. I think you'll remember, Vijay. We used to have Nectar of Devotion class, along with Bhagavad Gita class in the evening, and we'd sing that second one. Nana Shastra Pachadanaika Nipano Saddharma Sangstapako. This means that the six Goswamis were expert in scrutinizingly studying all the revealed scriptures in order to establish eternal principles of religion. And that's what we're living on. All of our literature, all its commentaries, what to speak of Nectar Devotion itself, is presented by Srila Prabhupada in consultation with those commentaries in those original books. Why did they do that? Nana Shata Pachadanakanimno Saddharma Sangstapako. Loka Namita Karino. This is the call to the real Vaishnavas for the benefit of the people in general. That's the idea. And throughout all the three worlds, they are most qualified to take shelter of and to honor and take Sharanyakaro. And what was their internal bhajan? Radha Krishna Padada Vinda Bhajananandena Muttaliko. Now here's the word mutta again. So there's also a spiritual madness which is way up there in advancement. But by worshiping and meditating on and writing about and glorifying Radha and Krishna's pastimes, their lotus feet, Radha Krishna Bhajananandena, they're always in bliss, anandena, and experiencing the madness of love of God. So we have to choose which madness we're going to go for. Are we going to simply stay within, or allow people to stay within this material madness, which just produces the greatest suffering, life after life? Or are we going to give them a way in which they can come out of that and eventually experience transcendental blissful madness, which is full of ecstasy and bliss? And that's what's happening in the spiritual world. We saw with Lord Chaitanya, if you read the Antya Lila, he was practically always in that state of madness and ecstasy. And sometimes it was so extreme, the devotees had to restrain him. He would dance and dance and dance and dance and go on for hours dancing. And even the drummers, you can imagine, they were getting exhausted. And finally, Nityananda had to stop him, put him on his lap, stuff like that. So this is our mission, to become sane and to help others to become sane. Beginning with what Lord Krishna does with, you're not that body. What is that little ditty I worked up? Everybody dies, nobody dies, wake up, and open your eyes. You're not that body. You're a pure spirit soul. Chant the holy name and attain life's goal. It's a little mission statement, But that everybody dies, nobody dies, this is one of the elements of the madness. This is the most amazing thing. Ahanyahani bhutani gachanti himalayam sheshikstavanamichanti kimaschayam atakparam. What could be more amazing than this? In other words, this is really crazy. Everybody knows that they're going to die. They've seen their grandfather die. They know people of history. Every day, millions of human beings, living entities who had been in human beings' body and therefore responsible for their work, are dragged off to the realm of Yamaraj for judgment and punishment. But those who are left are living as if they're all going to live forever. Yeah, I know I'll die eventually, but then that's it. I'm pretty good now, and keep going. It's insane. That's madness. In other words, it makes a complete mush and insanity out of struggling very hard to establish anything permanent in this world. To act as if you can be happy here and work so hard, you get the house, get the job, somehow, get a big loan, I'll pay it off later, And even if you get it, like these poor kids who go through school now. I mean, I had some college, but I was on a full scholarship. I didn't have any debts when I left. I didn't stay very long. In those days, you didn't come out of college with a $50,000 debt or $100,000. But now it's all become about the money, even the colleges. Even $1 million you can have, if you get a really nice degree. Then you say, okay, now where's the job? Prabhupada's saying, this is just like dogs, They're supposed to be trained as Brahmins. You have a big brain and intellect. You can go through college, get good. But then they have to go around for service. Where can I get a job, Where I can, and whatever you get, it's not going to pay off your loan. You become some intern somewhere which you're not even paid, So the whole thing is a dream. It's a phantasmagoria that eventually is exploded. And you're faced with the reality that I'm more miserable than ever. And meanwhile, the whole society, through the results of years and years of this exploiting the people in the society and the natural resources, I was just reading about the plastics. They're everywhere. We're breathing them in. It's like the ocean. They all go into the ocean, but the ocean also evaporates them and they go into the air, come down here. We breathe it in. Each one of us is like probably half plastic. Now, that's a little exaggeration. But it's not healthy for you. It's not healthy for the ocean either. There's all kinds of fish eating that stuff and dying. And it's all coming from oil. Is that madness? I mean, some demigod, imagine looking, down and saying, they're destroying their own nest. It's like you have a home and you do something in it where within 2 months it'll be totally destroyed. But in the meanwhile, we're really going to have a good time, right? If we're going to have your home. So this is the whole society is heading toward disaster and is in a disaster now. So the only hope is Krishna consciousness, is the spreading of Krishna consciousness, propagating the chanting of the holy name, this knowledge in the form of Srila Prabhupada's books, and the general welfare. I mean, the hitakarino. This is the hitakarino means for the sake of people in general, for the welfare. They work so hard to compile these books. It's inconceivable. Rupa Goswami wrote 100,000 verses. Bhagavatam is said to be 18,000 verses. Now, just one note on that, in case you're curious, if you ever wonder about it. I remember when we finished the Bhagavatam back in '89. I think it was '89, maybe '88. Some devotees were able to get the whole thing, and you can easily count up how many verses there are, and there were much less than 18,000. It was like 13-something thousand. And so they wrote in with great anxiety, where are the rest of the verses? 18,000 verses. So Gopi Prananand Prabhu, a wonderful devotee and Sanskrit scholar who did so much work on that Bhagavatam, he explained a granta, and you can find it in dictionary, literally is Bhagavad Gita, a small Bhagavad Gita sized verse, 32 syllables. That's a grunta. But we just got reading a chapter where you had these huge prose passages. You may have had 10, 20 gruntas there. You know what I'm saying? But it had only one number. So if you count that as one verse, you're not going to come to 18,000 when you add them all up in the Bhagavatam. You understand? That's what it means by a grunta. But in any case, he wrote 100,000, and and Jiva Goswami wrote 300,000. My God, you know, I mean, I have a little file of my poetry. You know, it's like it'll take you 10 minutes to read it, and that took me so much time to put together. But even the biggest author in the modern day will not produce that much. They're sleeping so little, eating very little, not wasting any time. You know, writing, all simply to glorify the Lord and leave for posterity the instructions of how you can come out of this trap of Maya. Maya has convinced us that with this body and that happiness lies in enjoyment of the gross and subtle body. And life after life, you know, you have an identity that involves other bodies that you come into touch with, and the children and the whole thing, and it's all a grand illusion. So we're in the business of trying to help people come out of this, of curing it. And what's the medicine? Bhavaushadi. Nivittatar shayar. Ubagiyamanas. Bhavaushada shota mano birama. Kauttamoshloka gunanavana puman varajeta vina pashugnat. So here the word madman isn't used, but the pashugnat is equivalent. So he's saying, this is right at the beginning of Bhagavatam, 10th canto, the third or fourth verse in the whole 10th canto. And Parikshit Maharaj, who's been sitting there, you can imagine, this is the 10th canto, so it's probably day 6, you know, and he hasn't been eating, sleeping, or drinking anything, just listening to Bhagavatam. So now he's eagerly asking Shukadev, now finally, you know, and please describe Krishna's pastimes, you know, in Vrindavan, the sweetest. So he has this verse. Nivritta tarshaya upagiyamana. Nivritta tarsha mean those who are free of all thirst or desire for material pleasure. Those are the pure devotees. Upagiya, when it's sung by them, and what's being sung is the glories of Krishna, the pastimes of Krishna, which are bhavaushadhat, which are as a medicine, aushadi, to cure the disease of birth and death. In other words, it makes you sane, so you'll act properly. And not a bitter medicine, but shrota mano abhirama. It gives great pleasure to the ear and to the mind. So here you have a medicine. You know, just like someone comes around and says, okay, we finally created it. Here's the cure, or let's call it a cure, for COVID-19. You know, if you happen to get it, just take this, and by the end of the day, you'll be fine. He says, oh, do I have to get jabbed? And this is a very bitter medicine. No. No jabbing, just take it. It tastes like honey. So who's that crazy person who said, nah, I'll take my chances. Don't leave any of it here, you know. So this is what the acharyas are giving us. This is what Shukadev Goswami is giving us, Vyasadeva. Here's the Bhagavatam, and when you develop the taste, you're able to taste it. It's the sweetest medicine, full of Krishna's Leela and so many wonderful things, singing and dancing. So therefore he asks, Kauttama shloka gunanavanad pumam virajeta. Who is that human being who would reject this wonderful medicine about Uttama Shloka, the most beautiful slogan, describing his qualities and pastime, except a pashugnat, that person who's killing himself, or eating meat. If you're too much of a meat eater, it's very difficult to become attracted to Krishna consciousness. Or you're killing your soul by just hanging on to your misconceptions and rejecting any other idea and basically not taking a book. So somehow or other, we have to keep working. And it was interesting, the reading this morning, where some of the distributors, I think Hare K. Swami also was giving, that it's the devotee who convinces the person, the character of the devotee, the feeling that he's giving. Here's someone approaching you and somehow is conveying to you the real emotion that they want to help you. They don't want to exploit you, because everyone's so used to that. The waiter comes, how can serve you? Yeah, they'll serve you, but they expect a big tip, and then there's a big bill to pay. It's just an illusion. It's just a charade. But this is for real. Someone's coming here, and they can, you can tell if someone's really sincere about it. And that's the whole point, is that the purity from the sadhana, from reading the book, that they're not in it to make any money here. They just, give a donation and take this. This is to help you. And if the devotee is really genuine and is following nicely, and the person's a little bit receptive and fortunate, they'll respond to that. So that's true for every preaching, for anything we try to do. Harinam also, one has to be. I mean, I've been at some Harinam parties and looked around. People are there, the devotees are there physically, but there's not much energy. It's like. But really, you go out and it should be a great celebration. People should be astounded. What is going on? So they're curious, and they'll take a book. So it's all depends. Everything depends on the sincerity and the purity in which you do it. There's that wonderful verse by Queen Kunti about the sincerity of the chanting, and this goes for all the chanting we do, whether it's the kirtan or the japa or on the street or whatever. Janmai shaya shuddha shiba edamana badak praman naiva hatti bedatan vaitrama kinchana gochara. That, my dear Lord, you're very easily approached, but only by those who are not progressively more and more intoxicated with material opulences, such as good birth, wealth, great material education, and personal beauty, physical beauty. Because such people cannot call upon you with deep feeling. It's all about the chanting of the holy name. You read that purport, it's all about, anyone can chant, but there's a quality to the chanting, Prabhupada says in the purport. And those who are too much entangled in the material opulences and getting and spending and all of that, they can't really feel that, they need God, But we know that we need God at every moment, right? And we also know from experience, if you chant with devotion and concentration and put your energy in it. I heard an amazing remembrance yesterday. Revatinandan, former Swami and early hero of the movement, he passed away, I think, yesterday. Did you know that? Revatinandan? Yeah. Look at it, you go to Dandabats, they have this. And Siddhanta Prabhu has recorded so many devotees, especially the old devotees, remembering Prabhupada. And so when someone leaves, he's been doing that for a while now, he puts up their in memoriam, their remembrance, because they go on for about half an hour remembering best. And he said some amazing things I'd never heard before. And he was describing, because he was there so many times with Prabhupada, and it was in a temple, it's one of the small early temples, a small house Prabhupada was visiting. I forget, maybe LA or something, before they had any of the bigger places. And Prabhupada was talking about dancing in kirtan. How important it is. It's even said it increases the ecstasy, it brings it. And so he started showing the Swami step, the famous Swami step, side to side, And then he said how he started jumping up and down. And so the other devotees, Revatinandan and others, were also jumping. But Prabhupada kept jumping, and jumping, and jumping, and jumping, until Revatinandan said, I got so tired, I had to stop. And he kept leaping. And I've seen Prabhupada jump before, but it was only for a few steps, So the point is, Prabhupada knew that the real attraction of the movement is going to be the devotees themselves. And how they relate, and the best way to become pure enough to become really potent in attracting people is chanting and dancing sincerely. There's always that element in anything we do. That's why one of the 6 symptoms in the Upadeshamrita, or 6 things we have to avoid, niyamagraha. Niyamagraha has 2 meanings. Achahara piyasa chapajabo niyamagraha. It has 2 meanings. One is not taking part in all the elements, the process. Right? That's kind of obvious. But the other one is taking part, but not with your heart. Just sort of being there, going through the motions. And of course, we know that that won't happen for long, because you really can't stay for long that way. But that there's a degree, you know, how much attention you're putting into everything. Every little thing, the chanting obviously, but also the cooking, the cleaning, everything requires to put your attention into it, and that is reflective of your devotion. The more that you're doing it attentively, the best way it could possibly be, the more Krishna will respond, and you get out of it. So that's certainly goes, I'm sure, you know, for book distribution as well. To really learn how to do it, and the prayer, and to be able to tolerate, all of that requires determination, as well as obviously, you know, strictness in sadhana and everything, and reading. So it's in order to do it, you have to become, over time, you have to become advanced, and it's a wonderful yajna, you know, sankirtan yajna, by which you're pleasing the Lord, you're spreading the movement, you're supporting the temple, and you're advancing at the same time. It's all auspicious in every direction. Okay, I'll leave it there for now. If someone has any comments or questions, either locally or remotely. I don't know if there are any remotely there. Bhakti Daniel.
Thank you, Dravida Prabhu, for a wonderful class.
Hare Krishna.
Is the question about, you were saying that we do certain things and it kills the soul, but I thought the soul doesn't die, or doesn't get cut, doesn't be buried by wind or something.
Yeah, there's several places. Atmaha, there's this word that comes up it means literally killing the soul, but the soul can't be killed. So what it means is that it is spiritual suicide, in the sense that, for instance, you know about the maha offense, the great offense of, you know, offending the spiritual master, you know. So that it's described, you know, can be completely uprooting your delicate, just budding bhakti creeper, right? Bhakti lata. So obviously the soul is not killed, but you've done something that is a great impediment to your spiritual life, and chances are you'll have to leave the association of devotees, which is our real shelter. And so, who knows? Then, as Prabhupada said, their whereabouts are unknown. You know, devotees who have left, and we hadn't heard from them for months. You know, anything could be going on. You know, because you're out of the shelter, and you can't take. You now have blocked off your ability to really chant nicely and associate. So that's what it means. The spiritual suicide. There's no eternal damnation, but you just postponed your going back to Godhead for who knows how long. Could be lifetimes, many lifetimes. So therefore, as I say, you know, vigilance is part of what it means to pay attention. Is that you're careful not to do things which are damage your, as Prabhupada said, your wholesome condition in Krishna consciousness. We've been given such a wonderful process, and the opportunity by all of the austerities from our previous acharyas, you know, Bhaktisiddhanta, Srila Prabhupada, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, etc. And so we should read about and realize how fortunate we are, and that should translate into vigilance, so that we are careful not to put impediments in our own way, that which can be called, you know, asadupasanaya. This word comes in. Nabadadamantaho asadupasanayatmahano. This is in the third line in the verse from the 87th chapter of the 10th canto, the prayers of the personified Vedas. This is one I started memorizing those. This is years ago when we came through. You remember Balaram? We get the 10th canto, 11th canto. This board would be too small for those verses. These are some of the longest verses in the Bhagavatam. Twadanupatam kulai midamamasarit priyavat. Chatatitaton mukhe tuhiyate piyatmanicha. Nabadadamantaho asadupasanayatmahano yadunushaya brahme urubahe kushadiribatach. So in this verse, he's giving a great explanation of the alternative that we have. First he says, my dear Lord, this is one of the Upanishads praying to Mahavishnu. My dear Lord, the human form of life is ideal for worshiping you. And when someone does that and uses his facilities, gross and subtle senses and everything in your service, then the body itself becomes not a burden, which is what it is now, but it becomes your best friend and very dear because it's paraphernalia for serving the Lord, you see. And on your side, as the super soul, you're like guiding, you're very happy and everything's wonderful. But alas, those who don't take their pleasure in serving you, and this is the key, and rather they worship the impermanent, mammon, asad upasanaya, atmahano, there's the word, spiritual suicide, killing themselves. Not literally, but their chance, and what is the result? Yadunushaye Brahman, they start wandering throughout different bodies, different situations, trying to satisfy the senses. And they're taking on fearful bodies, that, lower bodies, that even human bodies, that just produce great fear. Alas, he's saying this. So this is the choice we have in human form of life when we've come in touch with Krishna consciousness. We all know we have that choice, and the more that we make the right choice, moment by moment, in following the process, the more it'll become more spontaneous. This is the idea. It's not, it's not a great austerity for me to perform Tulsi worship, or be in Tulsi worship. I don't do so much, but it's not austerity, But if someone, is outside and you said, if you want to join, you'll need to get up at least 3:30 in the morning, and then do this and this, and then we're going to worship this plant. And I said, that's all right. I have my own religion, or whatever, In other words, for non-devotees, it's like inconceivable, all of the things we do. But after a certain time, it becomes a great joy to be able to come down to see beautiful Radhagiri Hari and the other deities and chant. And the more that we, this is why I try to stress this. Maybe I'll start doing that regularly. I started going through the Gurvashtaka and the other prayers that we sing. This Tulsi Puja is like super advanced. Prabhupada gave it to us. My only desire, my ardent desire is to worship Radha and Krishna, and please let me become your maidservant. It's like Manjari Baba right there. It's very, very advanced. But we have to understand the meaning of it and try to get into it. And so that's pertains to every service we do. What you bring to it in terms of your attentiveness is a reflection of your devotion. And Krishna responds. It becomes more nectarian, at every moment. All right, so it's getting late, so I'm going to end with one verse. I was reviewing, and I changed a little bit. It's just purely about Krishna and Vrindavan. It says, Urarik tamudadid tabangam, navajala dadikidanoda sadangam, yuvati vadaya tamadana tadangam, pranamatiyam tatikitadangam. It's actually a preaching verse. It says, his flute emanates enchanting sounds for the girls whose love for him abounds. Bow down to the cloud-complexioned Lord who's dancing upon the Kadindi shore. That's it. That's all you need to know. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.